Okay, so today I will be presenting on the Superfund site that is in Mission, Texas, that manufactured Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. I believe that I do have a little bit of insight on this information because I have studied it for over 10 years and I have also wrote a zine about it. So I think I can give a little bit of insight as to what is still going on in Mission. So, firstly, I'd like to talk about what a Superfund site is. A Superfund site is an area that is deemed too toxic by the EPA that the United States has to go and clean up the area because people cannot live in that area. The original spot that was considered a Superfund site was called the Love Canal, which was bought by a school district for $1 from a company called the Hooker Chemical Company. When they bought that area, they didn't realize that the company had actually dumped tons of toxic waste in that field. And so when they built the school, they didn't notice anything wrong at first, but then all of a sudden kids were coming out from recess with burns on their arms. After a while, they had started to get bouts of cancer in the area, respiratory issues, things like that. It got so bad that there were protests in the area that they were essentially demanding the United States to come and clean up whatever toxic waste this is. Come to find out that there was 81 different types of chemicals that the Hooker Company had actually dumped into the field. So, what's going on in Mission? So Mission has a site called the Hayes Salmons Factory. Built in 1907, the factory was originally used to make tools. It wasn't meant to be used as a site for chemicals, but during the 1950s, they switched their route and went to creating paint thinning factories. So what's so special about this spot is that it manufactured Agent Orange during the Vietnam War and was one of 3 sites in the entire world that actually manufactured this chemical. So you can imagine that the site was not the safest for most people or anybody at all. And it wasn't just Agent Orange. They actually manufactured 8 of the Dirty Dozen, which is a chemical, it is a group of chemicals that actually were deemed so toxic by the United Nations that if ever used again would be considered an act of biological warfare. So what is Agent Orange? Agent Orange is a defoliant that was used in the Vietnam War, as said before, that would melt leaves off of trees. Now, if you can imagine, if it's melting leaves off of trees, then it's more than likely doing more than that. In fact, what it actually was doing was it was burning people's skins and going and manipulating their DNA, which was causing a generational contamination. So what happened was that people were giving birth to children without eyes, brains, hands. A lot of them had very, very aggressive cancer at the age of 5. Like, this became a very big issue. So what is the issue? Why would they put a factory that was creating a chemical that would manipulate the DNA of a person in Mission, Texas? Well, it has a lot to do with structural racism. Structural racism is when an environment is used because it is considered easier to put this in a marginalized space. So a lot of these people that lived next to this factory were low income. They had little to no education. If they had a second language, it probably wasn't helpful at that time. And so it was easy for them to put this plant right in the middle of a colonia where a lot of these people didn't know what was going on, and they started working there. In fact, a lot of those people, like their kids now, believe that they built that plant because they knew that they could have those people work there for little to no money. So what is happening now? The plant closed in 1996. However, the site stood for another 2 years. So in 1998, it was actually demolished. In 1999, 2,500 lawsuits were filed and were won, giving the people $13 million to be dispersed. But instead of containing the toxic chemical, it was displaced all over Mission, which means that the site that was in one spot is now located in multiple spots. In fact, we interviewed a man that said that if you walk around some of the canals in Mission, your skin will start to burn. So the site is still considered a Superfund site. In fact, when there was a flood in 2019, and the flood was so bad that it started going into these people's houses, and they were climbing on top of furniture and tables to make sure that their skin wasn't touching the water because they knew that they were going to be affected by it again. So what can we do? This is not only an issue for the residents of that colonia, this is a community issue. This issue spans everyone all around the Rio Grande Valley. In fact, in the United States, this is clearly something that has been done to a marginalized group of people that need our help. And there can be things that can be done, like getting the TCEQ, to get them involved to deem this a Superfund site again. I mean, it still is. It was deemed a Superfund site in 2019, but they need to organize this spot and get it cleaned, because just covering it up isn't helping anybody, including them. In conclusion, it's up to us to make the difference. You know, we have to talk. We have to speak up. And I picked this topic because, as someone who is a millennial, you know, there was a lot of issues with people not really wanting to get involved in my age. And I feel like a lot of the Gen Z are more active in situations like this. And so I feel like maybe we can actually get this site fixed and cleaned. So if you have any questions, let me know.